Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, I continue my conversation from last week with Adam Kinakin, host of the Tactical Breakdown podcast, where we're discussing the importance of situational awareness in high-risk decision-making scenarios. But first, let's pay the bills. Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 279 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from consulting and training for the Louisiana Pacific Corporation and 2 days of training in Houston, Texas, specifically designed to improve situational awareness for EMS personnel. Today's feature segment is brought to you by SimsUshare. SimsUshare is a simple and affordable way to help you develop and practice situational awareness skills. You can quickly build sims from your photos to simulate almost any kind of incident, including active threat scenarios. And the new SimsUshare Command Training Center now lets you conduct multi-company drills over the internet, so you can even train while your companies stay in station. Check them out at SimsUshare.com. Okay, let's jump into our feature segment, part 2 of my two-part discussion with the host of the Tactical Breakdown podcast, Adam Kinakin, where we're talking about the importance of situational awareness during high-risk decision-making scenarios. When I work with an organization is I go back and I look at how they train. Because when I see something happen in the real world that doesn't seem to be smart, I wonder, well, where did they learn to do it that way? Mm-hmm. Did they learn to do it that way? And if they did, how was it that somebody taught them to do exactly what we wouldn't want them to do? You wouldn't want an officer who takes a gun off somebody to turn around and give it back to him. So then all his peers look at him and say, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. Why would you do that? And he can't even explain why he did it. He doesn't know why he did it. But then when you back up and you look at the training, you literally see that. Now, let me give you one more thing, and then I'll quiet and we can have more conversation. So I was teaching that concept. I used that example with firefighters, and I was at a public safety academy building in Pennsylvania. So it's a building where they hold police training, fire training, EMS training, like a whole big complex. So I had fire and EMS in this session, and I'm explaining this to them. We take a break. I said, okay, it's time for a break. We take a break, and as I'm walking up the hall, there is a door to a classroom, and the door is closed, but there's a kind of a long rectangular window in the door that's about, 6 inches wide and, 3 feet high. And so I peer in there to see what's happening in that room. Guess what they're doing? They're doing exactly the evolution that I had just talked about. Disarming somebody and then giving the weapon back and trying it again. Or they give the weapon back and another person comes and tries it. But either way, they disarm somebody and handed the weapon back. And I so much wanted to tell the people in my class, hey, all gather around. here's the poster child event. I didn't, though, because I didn't want to embarrass, the instructor or the students that were in that class. But I was stunned to see the very thing that I was talking about being done right there. And there might be some out there that would say, well, we would never train that way. We would do the full takedown and handcuff, and God bless you if you do. There's, good. But there are some that don't. And the instructors have the best of intention, as I did. I had the best of intentions. But what I realized is I was shortcutting a lot of the scripting, or I was piecemealing the scripting with the belief that that smart responder will be able to somehow in their brain find all the appropriate scripts and appropriately align them and do all the appropriate things all in less than 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And at the time that I was doing it that way, I didn't understand what I understand now. So it seemed logical. And now to me, it seems crazy.
There's so many things that are like rattling through my head right now with the stories, or the story you just told there. One, I am familiar with what you're talking about there. And the sad thing is, and you know this, that's not an isolated incident. That's actually been well documented multiple times. And unfortunately, some of the other circumstances have ended up in serious injuries or fatalities for the people involved. So I think you actually, when we first started this conversation, you said something that rings true to this, and it's, you don't know what you don't know. And that's exactly what happens when you have an instructor or a trainer who and every single person, I feel, when they get into that role where you become an instructor, become a trainer, become a mentor, you're not doing it to give false information or to be malicious or to do something incorrect, because you really feel that what you're teaching and training is going to be effective and does work, but you don't know what you don't know. And unfortunately, if the instructor level trainer who put you through didn't share that information with you, you're working with half the information that you need. Yeah. And one of the things that you brought up there, and it's funny because I had an interview with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Brian Willis, and he was actually the first person who ever put me through my PPCT instructor level course way back in the day. And one of the parts of that program was firearms disarms. And one of the things that we always started off with was, and he'd share stories like that, where this is why when we're training recruit level or senior level members, this is the reason why we show them this is the skill, and you go static and you say, you break down the minutia of it, right? This is where your hand placement is. These are all those little things that the technical pieces that you need to know. But once we get that part sorted out, we play those scenarios out to the end, just like you said. So that the last piece of information that's going through their head isn't me giving you that firearm back. It's completing that whole scenario. So after the disarm, whether now if I'm an officer and I have my own sidearm, we're trained to, you don't know if that weapon's functioning or not. So you're always going to go to yours because your weapon system is good. So whether you're discarding, you're controlling that other firearm or whatever, but you then gain control of the subject, you move into either hands-on, or your partner goes hands-on, or you do any one of the million things that you can do in those situations. But you don't stop with just, here's the firearm back, right? Here's the training gun back. Now, when we do that now, and we're going through those kind of static training movements, the simplest way is really to, one, there's the subject and the officer. And so the first iteration, the officer disarms the subject, and what happens then is the subject now becomes the officer and the officer becomes the subject. So instead of handing it back, you just reverse roles and then go through the scenario again, reverse roles, go through the scenario again, just so that you never have that situation where here's the knife back, here's the gun back, here's whatever, right?
Yeah.
But that's a training level issue.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the point that you were getting at, was that it's the trainer that doesn't know that all those little things that they're doing and everything that they're sharing with those people, it's being retained, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. It's the same way that, children retain information when they're going through grade school,
Yeah.
right? They pick up on all those little things, whether or not they consciously remember it or not. Your brain is a sponge, and every little thing that you share could be retained. And that's why from an instructor standpoint, you have to be very careful as to, this is the information that I'm sharing. And because it's just that, is that they may pick up on that one thing that you think is a joke or ha ha ha, whatever, but that's that one thing that that person retains. And now in that stress situation, their brain Rolodexes right to that moment because they remembered it, because it stood out, because it was funny. But like you said, you lose that left part of your brain. You can't now decide that that was a joke, not real. And your right brain goes, oh, actionable, I'm going to use it. And
Right.
I think that's a major concern, especially for instructors, is that knowing that everything that you share is going to be retained in some way, shape, or form. And if it's not the correct information, when it comes down to a life or death struggle or life or death scenario, they may be on the wrong side of it.
You're spot on. And as I think back, when I became an instructor, I had to take a class to be certified as an instructor. And the class taught me, instructional methodology, how to present in a classroom. I'll age myself, how to use an overhead projector, how to give feedback to a student who's maybe underperforming, how to create a test question and things like that. It didn't teach me anything about how people's brains learn and recall information. That was completely devoid of all my instructor training. And then when I went back to school and I started to learn these things, holy cow, Adam. It was like I had this epiphany, like, oh my God, it all makes sense now. Why we're doing some of the things that we do. Heck, some of the things that first responders were doing to get hurt and killed were the very things that I was training them to do. So what I'm doing is I'm watching these videos and reading these case studies, and they are doing exactly what I would have trained them to do, exactly the way I would have trained them to do it, exactly to the catastrophic ending. And now I'm looking at myself and saying, the people you trained, they're set up to fail. And you've done this, Rich. It's your fault. And I can't fix it because, they've gone on in life. This is, in some cases, decades ago. And I was just training them the way that I was trained. And some of these shortcuts have been trained into me too. And while I haven't had a catastrophic outcome, I have no severe burns and I've got all my fingers and toes, I have done things that seemingly were inexplainable. That after the fact, I would reflect back and even maybe sometimes chuckle at myself. Like, I don't even know why I did that. I mean, holy cow. I mean, I didn't remember, it was inexplainable. I just did it so quickly. And in most cases, it turned out fine. So, as these instructors are teaching these flawed techniques, although innocently, they're not bad instructors. They're just teaching what they've been taught the way they've been taught. And maybe 99% of the time it'll turn out fine, just doing it that way. But it's that 1% under those most significant consequence environments where that automatic performance then leads to something really undesirable. And then people line up to criticize and to make fun of the person who did what they did because it just seems inexplainable. Where in fact, if you look at the way they were trained, in many cases, it's completely explainable. And I hope that it changes. I'm sure you're sharing a message of how to train properly. I'm sharing a message of how to train properly. But, in the big scheme of the world, where us and everyone else who's carrying this type of message is a small fraction of people who could benefit from a new way of thinking. And I think I truly believe, Adam, there are a lot of instructors out there. When I share these instructors don't get the epiphany. They don't look at me and say, oh my goodness, oh my gosh, you're so right. No. What they look at me and they say, you are an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're talking about. I'm a good instructor. They defend themselves instead of, if they could step back and kind of be a third party observer to how they're doing their training and could be not emotionally connected to how they're doing the training, they'd see some of this. It is so easy for you to see when you're not like the trainer, you know, you're the observer. And sometimes the trainer is so close to their lesson plan and so committed to what they think is the right way to do it that they are in denial and sometimes get very defensive and angry because you're suggesting that there might be a different way to look at this. Some have eye-opening experiences, and some just want to they just want to like throat punch you for suggesting that they've done something that could be done differently.
Yeah, I think there's two really important points there. One is, from, like you said, for people that are doing these critical incident reviews, whether they be government officials or, you know, special investigators, civilian oversight committees, whatever it is, I think one of the major things, and this has always been a problem, is that they look at what's on paper as, here's your policy, here's your SOP, here's what it says here. You didn't do that, therefore you're now at fault, or now you're the one that's, you know, being looked at, and they don't understand the totality of the situation. So I think one of the major things that I think that I would like to champion, and I know you are yourself, is sharing that there's more to a situation than here's the policy, here's the procedure, here's what the officer needs to do, or here's what the fireman needs to do, or here's what the first responder, or here's what the military member needs to do. Because you're taking 1% of a complete situation and you're discounting the human element. And that is the situation, is that human element. So I think that's one major point. The other being, you said, for trainers, I'm completely open and honest about this. I used to be one of those guys that was like, what are you talking? Don't tell me how to do my job. I know what I'm doing. I know this stuff inside and out. Because when I first started doing it, and I started with defensive tactics training, I had done martial arts for an extended period of time. That was my day-to-day. Like I was doing martial arts training every day. I was learning from multiple different people, multiple systems. And now I'm like, okay, here's one specific system. I know this stuff inside and out. And every time somebody said, well, maybe you should look at it this way, I'd be like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. And I'd discount it. But I don't know if it's just time in or getting older and wiser, but you start to realize that you don't, like, from when I first started, I look back now and I laugh. I didn't know jack shit about anything that I was teaching. I knew what was in the book. I knew what I was saying and teaching, but I didn't understand why or how. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I really didn't understand was the learning modality that you had spoken to. Is that I think one of the major things, and here's a question for you. I'll say my piece, and then I want to hear your thought on it.
Okay.
If you were to pick one thing that you think should be incorporated into every instructor level training, what would it be? So mine would be learning modalities for students. So instructors need to understand and learn how people learn, whether it be, you know, auditory, tactile, or whatever. They have to understand how their students are going to learn, and that not everybody learns the same, because that's a core component of education as a whole. Every single person that's a teacher that goes through education learns that, and they learn it right from day one. These are things this is the core part of what you're doing, is that not everybody's the same, and not everyone's going to learn at the same rate or in the same way. And a lot of the times that I've seen in instructor level training on the first responder, police side, military side as well, they may cover it, they may touch on it, but they don't go far enough in depth. It's, here's your PowerPoint, and then let's go hands-on, let's get onto the mat, let's actually get into the stuff that you came here for. And that stuff gets brushed aside and never touched on again.
Yeah. I agree.
Me,
I agree.
That would be
I agree with you on the on the value of the learning modalities. Um, I would I would add a couple of things to that. I think that it's funny that you said that, because I'm like that was probably going to be my number one. So now that it's your number one,
Yeah, stole it from me. Yeah.
I have this awkward pause of like, oh man, he used the best one. So what I would say is that it's very is as we train, as we teach and train, what we have to keep in mind is that there are two learning systems in our brain. There's actually multiple learning systems. I'll talk about two. The cognitive, which is the what do I need to know? When do I need to know it? Why do I need to know it? We learn that mostly in the classroom. And then we do hands-on stuff, and that's the how do I do it? So we have the classroom component, cognitive. We have the hands-on kinesthetic. What I would encourage instructors to do is to marry up the two, so that when we're in the field teaching the hands-on stuff, we're sprinkling onto that the what, the when, and the why as we're teaching the how. So that we don't just learn the how. See, if we're in the field and all we're focused on is the how, then we get to actually do it in the real stress environment. We do the how without realizing why and when, and is this the right thing to do? So in the stress of doing actual field evolutions, the instructor would help the student by, perhaps if they've already taught it in the classroom, using Socratic teaching methodology, which is to teach by asking questions. So before they do the evolution, maybe they would cue or query the students with a series of questions about the cognitive side of it. Let's talk about when and why and how of this. Now let's do it. And after we do it, then maybe we would debrief a little bit on the when and the why and the how, and circumstances that might be a little different. And really what we're trying to do is not just get them to learn how to do it, but get them to be critical thinkers as they're learning how to do it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah. I hope people listening, it makes sense to them, because I've always thought being an instructor, well, I shouldn't say I've always thought, because I just demonstrated that I didn't always think this, but you should always be a lifelong learner in the field, your chosen field of profession, right? Whatever you're passionate about, you should always be learning. And that doesn't necessarily mean learning everything about your specific niche or job or profession. It means going outside of the box and learning best practices from other professions, because that's where the bread and butter comes from. That's where the best points that I've ever found, they come from outside of what I was taught or the profession that I was in, right?
I agree.
And I just think that's a really important message for anybody listening to this, or your audience as well. I think that's a great takeaway from this.
It is, and that's probably been one of the greatest learning opportunities for me as I have transitioned to this message to industry. Is I spent my whole adult life serving as a first responder, so I really didn't have much immersion into how the private world looks at things, and getting these chances to go in and see how these private companies look at things, and how even just something as that most people might not think about is the if they're a publicly traded company, how does shareholder demand for revenues and profits drive culture all the way down to the front line, where a worker might stick their hand in a machine because they don't want to waste the time to follow the proper safety procedure. And then when they stick their hand in the machine and their hand gets stamped off, they get written up for not following the procedure. And that seems to be the end of the analysis, where in fact, if you were to interview that employee about why they stuck their hand in the machine, what you might learn is they stuck the hand in the machine because they had a fear of getting in trouble for slowing production, which would then impact revenues. And they had a more fear of consequence than the fear of losing their hand. And when you understand that fear is more powerful than the fear of having your hand stamped off, then you start to understand more about what drives the kind of behavior that causes somebody to seemingly not be paying attention to what they're doing. They're really paying attention to what they're doing. But their attention is on, don't slow the production, not how do I keep from losing my hand. And the whole dynamic of that, because in the public world, we're not driven by, profits and shareholders. And so to see how that world spins and how it can influence culture all the way down to the frontline worker behavior has been rather fascinating for me, to step outside, the world that I knew into this world that I didn't know. It's learning a lot.
It's funny. The irony in that is when, and this is something that maybe it jumps out at you especially when you move from a profession like law enforcement, military, or something that's governmental or anything like that. And then you step into the private industry and you see those types of things where it's priority goes to profitability and safety sometimes gets left behind. But the irony is that, that worker gets injured on the job. The total cost to the company is going to far and exceed any type of efficiency they would have gained by skirting the safety measures due to time loss, insurance. There's a plethora of costs that come with and that worker being overtime accrued if you have to bring another person. Like it's funny because when you look at the bottom line, and I'm sure you see this too when you talk to these companies, is that you're actually better off spending more time on the training and teaching them how to do things properly and safely, because it avoids an incident that's going to cost you 10 times as much.
That is absolutely correct. If we can inspire the decision makers to see the potential loss consequence, because if they haven't had those losses, it's hard for them to believe that might ever happen. If it hasn't happened, if they haven't had a significant loss event, it'd be kind of like you're going into a factory and say, we need to talk about insurance just in case a plane lands on the roof of your factory here. And they'd be like, come on, that's very far reaching. No plane has ever landed on the roof of our factory, and we're willing to take the chance that no plane ever will. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of folks in management. I don't think the safety people necessarily think this way, but a lot of folks in management that are in denial that they're just one unlucky roll of the dice away from a significant event that just hasn't happened yet, but it's been because of a series of lucky outcomes rather than the application of best practices. And the best practices of proper training and such, well, that requires time and investment of money. And sometimes they're not willing to commit the time or to invest the money. And I see this some even in public safety organizations. The cost, there is a cost to doing it right. There's arguably a greater cost to not do it right. And but the greater cost to not doing it right is deferred. It's not immediate. The cost of doing it right is immediate. I have to spend this money. We have to spend this time. We have to have this incur this overtime. And the deferred is, well, if it never happens, well, then we never incur the cost. So we'll take that chance. And there's a lot of organizations out there willing to take the chance.
It's funny. in my mind, I'm kind of dovetailing all the things that we've talked about today together. And you had spoken about with that incident involving the officer and the firearm, action versus reaction. How, you had said, his action to disarm that subject, that was immediate. And the reaction of the subject was slow. And now we're talking about, safety and liabilities on the corporate side of things. Where you see that in the law enforcement, first responder, military side is that changes aren't made unless something bad happens. There has to be an incident in order to change policy. And I know you've seen, it's no different. It doesn't matter if you're in Canada, in the US, in the UK, or anywhere in the world. Agencies aren't going to make wholesale changes unless there's a reason to, unless there's a public outcry, somebody gets killed, there's a serious incident, and that's when something changes. Even though there's the best intentions and the best information to change it before it happens, unless it does happen, they're not going to change it. And
if I could add one piece to that.
Sure. Yeah.
The bad thing has to happen in our agency. If the bad thing happens
Very
3
true.
communities over, then we're still in denial that it'll ever happen here because we're better and smarter and better equipped and better trained. And, we're not surprised it happened to them. Look at them. It wouldn't happen to us, though, because we've got it figured out. And that's so sadly, you're right. And adding to that tragedy usually has to happen within our own organization for us to have our eyes opened wide of the realization that we were vulnerable. Look at how many bad things are happening, Adam, that if you were to take a broad approach and say, okay, this bad thing happened in this department. How many times has that or something so similar to that we could package it together and say those two are the same, are happening across the broad spectrum of our profession? Very rarely does anyone have a first time occurrence of a bad event, even in industry. But if we just look at some other organization and say, well, unlucky for them, but it hasn't happened here, so we're not going to worry about it. We're not learning from, every near miss and casualty in another organization is a gift for us if we're willing to accept the gift and learn from it and maybe change the way we do things as a result of their tragedy. We all don't have to have our own original tragic outcome to change, but some organizations, as you said, if it hasn't happened, it won't happen. They're in denial. And sometimes even when bad things happen, they don't change things. Oh my goodness. It's, and that's painful. They have a tragic event and they still don't change anything because it takes time and effort and money and commitment and culture change and all these things that, it's easy to talk change, hard to implement.
So on that, Rich, why don't, I know your listeners obviously know with the situational awareness matters and the programs that you do and the stuff that you do. Can you share a little bit for our listeners as to your company, your program, the consulting work that you do and kind of bring this all home for us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So my entire focus is helping individuals and teams see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. That's kind of my mantra. And the whole how to do that is learning how to develop and maintain situational awareness in stressful environments, and then how to use the situational awareness to improve high-risk decision-making outcomes. And that all kind of comes together as a package of knowledge that then I hope that the trainers then, what I really hope is that the trainers then take the things that I teach and they then incorporate that into their teaching methodologies, that they bring it to life by incorporating these situational awareness, high-risk decision-making components into actually how they're teaching both the cognitive and the hands-on kinesthetic components of their training. That's my greatest wish, is that these lessons then are, brought to life. And sometimes organizations will have me, after I do a training, they'll engage me to prepare and send them a little video vignette, like once a month. Hey, Rich Gasway here, your situational awareness lesson this month, and kind of give them a little value add, a little reminder. So each month, if you do something one time and it's a knockoff event and everybody gets all rah-rah, but then they go back to life and challenges and time demands, and it's very easy for that information to, slide out of memory, so to speak. So having I'm most inspired by those organizations that say we're not interested in just the one-time knockoff, come in, wow them with a 4-hour presentation, and then, mic drop and leave town. I'll do that, but the greater inspiration for me is when they say, now, where do we go from here? How do we keep this message alive? How do we continue to grow the knowledge and the talent and the change of thinking and behavior and essay in our members? I think there's some organizations, and you probably see this too, Adam, they expect you to come in and in one session, just sprinkle your pixie dust around and everything's going to be changed and better because you come in and gave them some ideas. And then when you leave, those ideas fall into the shadows, and then they fall back to their former way of thinking and doing, and it doesn't last. And so that's part of the challenge, is not just teaching an organization how to have better awareness and how to improve decision making as a skill, but then to put it to life, to turn it into daily practice, turn it into monthly reminders. Sometimes I have organizations say, we send out a bulletin, a monthly safety bulletin. Can you contribute something to a monthly safety bulletin that can be a 200 or 300 word lesson that the supervisor can read to the employees that'll remind them about something about situational awareness? And we'll do this, on a monthly basis. At least, if they're getting a bite at it every every so often, it's harder to completely forget about it when it just keeps coming back and being reminded to you, about different components of why it's so important, and tips and tricks and hacks and best practices keep coming and keep coming. Then, over the course of time, it's just kind of like, going on a diet. You can't say, well, I'm going to go on a diet and wake up the next morning and be 30 pounds lighter. It's a process of changing habits and ways of thinking and ways of eating and ways of exercising. And, it's a whole package, and it changes over time, not changes with one off event, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you have to find a way to weave it in and interwork it into the framework of what you're doing, right? You can't, if those one-offs don't work. I mean, they work for a bit, but they don't stick around. Like you said, it just fades off, and you can give the most amazing speech. There's a lot of information out there. Somebody like Tony Robbins or something comes in and does a speech to a giant corporation. Everyone's all rah, and their sales go up 200% the next week. And then after 2 weeks, there's an extremely sharp decline to either the standard they were at before or even below, because there's that drop off. Right. And that's something that they were super interested in, because you have like a huge motivational speaker. And for some reason, when we talk about safety, a lot of people tend to shut off, right? Oh God, I got to sit through another safety briefing. Okay, let's hear it. Right. And they're thinking about everything but.
Right.
So if an organization can find a way to work that into their programs, and I think that's monthly memos, or, if you're doing daily briefs with your supervisors or people on the floor or whatever it is, I think that's a great way to do it. So if there are companies or people that are listening to this and they want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks. And we'll do the same for your programs as well. So the easiest, best way to find me is my website. And it's just samatters.com. And that's SA for situational awareness, just the shortened abbreviation, SA Matters, all together one word, samatters.com. And there is, the blog, the podcast, the contact me tab. If somebody wants to see the programs, they're listed there. If they want to buy a book or one of my videos, it's all there. Everything they would want there to learn about the topic of situational awareness, is including how to reach me with the contact me tab, is right there at that one location. So instead of just worried about my email and my phone number and everything, just samatters.com, and that's the one-stop shop for everything you would want. In fact, for your listeners, there's a lot of free resources there. All the podcasts are free. All my blog articles are free. So if somebody wanted to see or learn a little bit more about some of the things that we talked about, they could go there and just for free immerse themselves, invest their time, and learn. There's over 400 articles that I've written on the topic of situational awareness and high-risk decision-making. So they won't run out of content to inspire them to whatever level they feel inspired.
That's awesome. And what we're going to do is I'm going to make sure too on our end, we're going to have links to all those resources on our site so that everybody can find you right from our website as well, and get your message out there. I think it's such a fantastic message. Whatever I can do to help you share that, I'm going to do, man. I think it's a great cause, and I think what you're doing is super important, and there's not enough people doing it. So I want to thank you for that as well.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your mission as well. But you at the front end said how to reach you, but let's do it again here on the tail end.
Sure.
How to find you and get connected with you.
Sure, yeah. So same thing. The website is going to kind of be the hub for everything, and the website is thebreakdown.ca, so THE breakdown.ca. On there, we're going to have the podcasts. Obviously, you're going to be able to access it on there. But one of the other key parts of our website is that it's a resource, just like yours. One of the things that we focused on was for first responders, for law enforcement and military. And so we have like a crisis support page on our website. So for anybody who's in crisis, we lose any first responder, police officer, military member that takes their own life is one too many. And that's a message that has to get out to everyone, is that there are people, if you're ever in a situation and you're in crisis, or you feel like, you can't take it anymore, there are resources out there for you, whether they be crisis helplines, anything like that. So on our website, one of the first things you find are support for any members of the community that need crisis support. And then we also share in tips and tricks and articles, just like you have, situational awareness and books and resources for anybody in all these professions. And hopefully it'll kind of just be a hub for everyone to get information or to contact. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've done is I've had people reach out to me on the website with contact me. They're like, hey, I was wondering if you could get me in touch with this person, because I know you talk to them. So I'm doing a lot of that back and forth where I'm kind of the intermediary between two different experts,
Right.
and getting them in touch with each other. So if you have experts that listen to your show, and you think you have something valuable to share, just like you do, Rich, then you can get in touch with me on there. And I'm more than happy to have everybody on our show to share the information, to share the knowledge, and to get it out there for everyone.
Now, if they wanted to subscribe to your podcast, and they go to their podcast platform, what would they put into the search term that would help them to find the podcast?
Yeah, it kept it real simple. You just search tactical breakdown. So 2 words, tactical breakdown. That's it. It's on all the major podcast providers. So you can check it out now. We have a couple episodes up, but like I said, there's going to be about a dozen more coming out in the next couple of weeks. And then every week after that, we're going to be shooting these amazing interviews out with our subject matter experts, just sharing knowledge and information. And some of them are going to be, for certain industries. So sometimes we're talking about firearms training, but a lot of it is about mental health, dealing with people in crisis. And there's just the topics are kind of go from one side of the fence to the other. It's all over the place, but it's all really relevant information from some of the best experts in the world. So
good. Well, thank you for your mission. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. Thank you for coming on to my show and helping to advance my mission and the awareness of my listeners and viewers on the lane that you are passionate about and trying to make a difference there too. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely, man. I mean, anytime I can help out or anything like that, I'm more than willing, and I appreciate you taking the time as well. I know how busy you are. I know we spoke earlier and we were trying to get this rolling. So anytime, man, let's do this again.
Okay. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks.
The Situational Awareness Matters show was launched in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who've had near-miss events to share their stories. When I'm on the road delivering situational awareness programs, I often ask attendees about their near-miss events that they've had, and they have shared with me some amazing stories. Those stories motivated me to launch this podcast in the first place, so those lessons could be shared with a bigger audience, you. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SA Matters Radio, and the companion video program on YouTube, SA Matters TV, along with other videos that we have posted there, have enjoyed more than 800,000 downloads. I am so thankful for your support. I feel so honored to be able to provide a platform for these amazing stories to be shared. If you like the show, please do me a solid favor. Please subscribe. For the audio version of the show, search for SA Matters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version, subscribe to SA Matters TV on YouTube. And if you find the show valuable, I would really appreciate it if you would give it a rating and write a review. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show. But more importantly, your feedback inspires me to want to work harder for you. Since 2007, Situational Awareness Matters instructors have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained over 80,000 individuals to improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, public transportation operators, aviation workers, oil refinery process operators, and more. If you or someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we're here to help improve your safety and your survival and to help you accomplish the most important mission of all. And that is to go home to the ones who love you. I'd like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, agencies, and departments that have hosted some recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. The Odessa, Texas Fire Department, the Louisiana Pacific Corporation, the Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council EMS Committee, the United States Air Force Academy, the North Metro Fire Department, and the Evans Fire Department. If you're interested in attending one of our upcoming events, here's where we're going to be in the future. On August 8th and 9th, we'll be at Fire Rescue International in Atlanta, Georgia. On August 12th, at the Itasca County 911 Center in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. On August 14 through 16, the Lansing Fire Department in Lansing, Michigan. On August 17th, the Ingham County Fire Chiefs Association in Michigan. August 21 and 22, the Coastal Bend Regional Advisory Council EMS Committee in Corpus Christi, Texas. August 27 through 29, at the Voluntary Protection Program Participant Association National Conference in New Orleans, Louisiana. If you want to see the locations of all the upcoming events, just head over to the samatters.com website, and the schedule is under the Training Programs tab on the top of the homepage. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the homepage, and I'll give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there are several ways that you can do that. Check the show notes for how to get connected with us by signing up for our monthly newsletter, by subscribing to the SA Matters radio podcast, by subscribing to the SA Matters TV YouTube channel, and how to follow us on the social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 279 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Adam Kinakin, host of the Tactical Breakdown podcast show. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, Sims You Share. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, and organizations and associations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted live stream training, where I come to your organization live via the internet to train your members. Thank you to the more than 3,000 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The feedback I've received from Academy graduates is just amazing and very humbling. Thank you for that. Most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.